Anyone who grew up playing in the arcades can tell you that finding a sequel to one of your favorite arcade games is few and far between. Some of the best known arcade games received sequels in the arcades that many don't know were either direct sequels or spiritual successors. In this episode of the Big Retro Show, I'm going to be talking about some games that you may not have realized were sequels or spiritual successors. We kick things off with Super Burger Time, which is a direct sequel to the original Burger Time. The original Burger Time was a fun puzzle game that captivated the hearts of arcade gamers everywhere. The premise was simple: walk over pieces of bread, lettuce, cheese, and meat to make hamburgers, while avoiding the baddies, which were other foods such as eggs and hot dogs. Many of the things that people loved about the original Burger Time made their way into the sequel. Super Burger Time released in the arcades in the 1990s and received a 3D upgrade. In Super Burger Time, you play as Peter Pepper Jr. and are once again tasked with making the hamburgers while avoiding the bad guys. The game mechanics play very much like Burger Time, giving players a familiar feel. Aside from the graphical makeover in Super Burger Time, you must jump on the hamburger pieces instead of walking over them as you did in the original. You can also stomp on the hamburger pieces to make them fall faster. Much like his father, Peter Pepper Jr. uses pepper to paralyze his enemies, and you can use the hamburger pieces to squash them. You can also pick up a variety of power-ups that will make you run faster, jump higher, and absorb one hit, or pick up an icing gun that you can use to shoot your enemies. Super Burger Time also hosts boss battles, which is a welcome addition to the game and something that was lacking from the original. Another welcome addition to the game is the ability to play co-op. The original Burger Time had just a black background as its playfield, but Super Burger Time's backgrounds are filled with color, which adds to the game's enjoyment. The enemies in Super Burger Time also received an upgrade, and you will be facing off against other healthy foods that want to stop you from making hamburgers. Super Burger Time was ported to Steam, the PS4, and Nintendo Switch, and you can pick it up for under $10. Everyone knows that Contra was perhaps one of the best games of the arcades, and its home port is a celebrated addition to the NES library. When Super C made its way to the NES, it sort of overshadowed the arcade sequel, Super Contra. Super Contra was released in the arcades in 1987 and was a direct sequel to Contra. Very much like Super C, it was a sequel to Contra on the NES. The game takes a nod from the original Contra, and once again you take on the role of the commandos Bill and Lance to stop the Red Falcon. The game plays very much like the original Contra, but also incorporates overhead run-and-gun levels. Super Contra shares the same graphical style and running and jumping mechanics of Contra, except of course for the overhead run-and-gun levels. Each stage pits you against a boss fight, adding to the fun. I actually never played Super Contra in the arcade prior to playing it for this video. The game is very different than Super C on the NES, and I kinda like that. Super Contra in the arcades is hardly ever mentioned in conversations involving Contra, and this is why I decided to showcase it in this video. Have you played Super Contra in the arcades? Kung Fu Master was an excellent game to play in the arcades, and when it released onto the NES, it made the system a must-buy. There was something so satisfying about kicking the crap out of your enemies in each of the stages, and the enemies from the little tom-toms to the snakes were all impressive to fight. While the game never received a direct sequel, it received a spiritual successor in 1988's Vigilante. Your mission in Vigilante mirrors your mission in Kung Fu Master. Rescue your girlfriend named Madonna, who was kidnapped by the bad guys. But instead of fighting in dojos, you take to the streets of New York City as you take on the Skinhead Gang. Your attacks in Vigilante consist of mostly punches and kicks, but every once in a while an enemy drops some nunchucks and you get to wield them to take out the bad guys. It's a fun addition to the game that sets it apart from the Kung Fu Master game. Like in the original, you beat up scores of bad guys and must face off against a boss character at the end. The gameplay is simple, and that's a good thing. Vigilante was ported over to the TurboGrafx 16 and the Sega Master System, and to the 16-bit computers of the time. You can also play this game on Switch and PS4. The original Twin Eagle, Revenge of Joe's Brother, was an awesome shoot 'em up that helped cement the genre as one of the favorites of the arcade. Twin Eagle is a vertical shoot 'em up that had you piloting an attack helicopter with a buddy, and you take on waves of enemies in your mission to avenge your brother. Its sequel, Twin Eagle 2: The Rescue Mission, was released in the arcades in 1994, and once again you are at the helm of an attack helicopter in a 3D upgrade to the original. Aside from the upgraded 3D graphics, Twin Eagle 2 was different than its predecessor in that you also had to contend with ground attacks. One button shoots in the air, the other on the ground. Not sure why they did this, but I think it's maybe because to showcase the enemies they built on the ground that are shown in isometric viewpoint. The third button controls a screen clearing attack that you will be using quite often in your playthrough. In Twin Eagle 2 you can collect power-ups that will beef up your fire, and I found this to be one of the more forgiving shoot 'em ups that I have played. The game consists of 3 areas, each with multiple stages. At the end of each stage you face off against the boss. It's nothing new, but that's not a bad thing. It's a great game that deserves some attention, and if you ever find it in the wild, it's worth putting a quarter or two in. Capcom really hit it out of the park with the arcade version of Strider. What was not to love about playing a ninja who slices and dices his way through exotic enemies, man and machine alike? Most people don't know, however, that Strider was followed up by the excellent arcade game Strider 2. And no, I am not talking about the Sega Genesis Strider Returns that came out in 1990. Strider 2 was released in the arcades in 1999 and serves as a canonical sequence to the original. In Strider 2, once again you take on the role of Strider, and it's your mission to take out the Grand Master, who seemingly controls the world. He's a tyrant and you need to take him out. Man, I love simple plot lines like this. Right off the bat, you will notice that the game's graphics showcase 3D backgrounds and different color palettes from the original. The game has more of a cartoony feel than the original, which isn't a bad thing, but it's different enough. The character sprites and animations are rendered in 2D sprites, and the controls resemble the original Strider. As Strider, you can jump, run, double jump, and do a whole bunch of Gymkata moves. Throughout your playthrough, you can find different power-ups for your sword, and power-ups that give you additional life and replenish it. You can also find a boost mode that will allow you to shoot plasma at your enemies, which comes in handy during the boss fights of the game. The enemies in this game aren't too difficult, and you can defeat most of them with just one swipe of your sword. The game consists of 5 missions that are a joy to play in. This is mostly because of the game's awesome graphics. There's just so much to do and see in the stages, and it adds to the production value. Strider 2 was ported to the original PlayStation, and a loose copy goes for $50. A complete in-box copy goes for $124. And that's going to be it for the Big Retro Show. If you enjoyed this video, drop a comment, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.